right, good morning, everyone. My name is Jennifer Bryant, and I lead the Greater Washington Center for Employee Ownership. The mission of the center is to promote and support employee ownership throughout the District of Columbia and surrounding counties in Maryland and Northern Virginia, to preserve legacy businesses, increase job quality, and build community wealth. Today is our first webinar in our new We Built This series, highlighting the stories of businesses in the DC region that have successfully converted to employee ownership. You can learn more about upcoming events and sign up for a free consultation call with an expert advisor at gwceo.wacif.org. We're excited to partner on this series with the Employee Ownership Expansion Network. And with that, I'll turn it over to Steve Storkin from EOX for opening remarks.
Thanks, Jennifer. I appreciate you asking us to join today, and can't wait to hear the story of Harkins Builders with Kathy, Mega, and Keith. I'm just going to start real quick by sharing a few things about employee ownership, specifically ESOPs and how they work, why they're good for the Greater Washington, DC area and America as a whole. So let me just quickly get into my PowerPoint here. But before I do get there, I do want to make sure that Jennifer doesn't shortchange what the newly created Greater Washington Center for Employee Ownership does. It's an amazing organization. It's just brand new. We've taken some good time to think about how to create it and what to do. So I really want to make sure people know that it exists, and I encourage you to check out their website. It is a part of a larger network. EOX is a national nonprofit organization that's trying to expand employee ownership across the country by opening state centers for employee ownership. You can see the network of state centers there, with DC being one of the most recent ones. Our most recent one, I think, was Connecticut. So one of the most recent ones. So I'm excited to see where this goes and how this kicks off with things like today, where we're sharing these resources, I think, that are valuable for business owners. So let me start by talking about employee ownership. While there are many forms of employee ownership, we are going to talk about ESOPs today. Employee ownership, I know people have heard the phrase, a win-win situation. I like to say that employee ownership is a win-win-win-win situation, and that it's a win for business owners, companies, employees, and communities. And I know you're going to hear that throughout the story today about all of these different ways that this ESOP story has been a win for this business. Studies have shown that employee ownership is a win-win situation in different ways. It boosts sales for employee-owned companies compared to their competitors. It increases wages and benefits across the board. Average account balances in these retirement plans are considerably higher than those with the non-competitive, non-ESOP owned companies. And one thing that we've really seen, even with this COVID, with the effects of COVID that continues, is the layoffs. Employee-owned companies are just much more stable than non-employee-owned companies. We don't have the latest COVID numbers. I've seen a study that hasn't been published yet, but the numbers are significantly different when you do have layoffs, where the employee-owned companies just kind of band together and try whatever they can to be creative and not having to lay off employees. And so you can see those statistics there. So let's talk about an ESOP. What is an ESOP? It's a very, can be a very complicated concept, but I like to try to make it as easy as possible and to tell you this. An ESOP is nothing more than a profit sharing plan. It is a retirement plan that owns a company. And it's done that way by having a company make profit sharing contributions to the employees who are working there. And rather than invest them in mutual funds like they do in a 401k plan, this plan invests in stock in the company in which they work. So employees get a profit sharing contribution, and they use that to purchase shares of the company in which they work. Prior to the sale of an ESOP, you could maybe have 1, 2, 3. I think Harkins probably had many more owners than that. You can have individual shareholders, but after the sale to an ESOP, if it's 100% sold to an ESOP, it's sold to a trust, and then the participants become the beneficiary of that trust. You can also have a partial sale to an ESOP, where you do have some shareholders remain, and then that ESOP trust becomes the owner again. So maybe you have a shareholder who keeps 40%, another shareholder with 20, and then the ESOP trust has 40. Whatever percentage that you want to have in that transaction, the ESOP can either be a partial or a 100% owner of a company. Reasons you might want to implement an ESOP. I think the number one the reason we see is shareholders want to leave a legacy. They don't want to sell to an outside buyer. They want to show loyalty to their company or to their employees and to their community. They want to reward the people who helped build that company. I think you're going to hear that story today. There are other reasons. The main reason to have these slides is if, as we share the slides later on, if people want more details. So I don't want to touch on all of these, but I think we see mostly the loyalty to the company, loyal to the employees, and having to leave a legacy. You can also diversify your assets while still maintaining control, so you don't have to sell as a business owner. You don't have to sell 100% of the company to the ESOP. Again, part of this story today. And then there's always talks about tax benefits. We can spend an entire seminar or two on tax benefits. And Keith, I know I've seen you talk about this before. We will not do that today. We want to get to the story. But there are significant tax benefits to both the selling shareholder and to the ESOP as a company after selling to the ESOP. The last thing I'll go over is just very quickly how this works. ESOP steps. First of all, there's a trust that is developed. An ESOP trust, like any sort of testamentary trust, a trust is a legal entity that's going to hold the shares on behalf of the employee. So that trust is created. And then there is a transaction that occurs. You have either a loan from the selling shareholder or from a bank that is made to the trust. And after that, the trust then buys the shares. In this case, this is Pat. I think we were Pat's shop. I guess Pat does a cafe. So Pat is selling her shares. So there's a loan between Pat and the trust, or a loan between the bank and the trust. And that trust is, the money inside that trust is then used to purchase the shares from Pat. And then each year, as employees continue to work, each year that loan is in place, shares are released from the trust to the employees. So employees earn these shares by their sweat equity. They don't buy these shares. They don't put money into the trust typically. They're just earning these shares that are allocated as they work and as the debt is paid down. And then now they have stock that they hold in their account that gets valued annually. And they're given an account statement that tells them how many shares they have and how much that value of those shares is worth and what their total account value is in that retirement trust. When they leave the company, employees can turn those shares back in and receive a retirement benefit. Either they take cash and spend the money in retirement, or they can transfer to an IRA or a 401k, but it becomes a retirement plan asset for those employees. And for Pat, not only did she sell her business, she kept the business in the community. She received fair market value for those shares. It's a way to keep that business local, a way to keep it in the community, and have that business owner reward those employees. And so with that quick overview, Keith and Kathy and Mega, I'm going to turn it over to you. I will introduce you both. Kathy Humm is the Director of Human Resources for Harkins Builders in Columbia, Maryland. She joined Harkins in 2013 as the HR manager, and in 2015, she became the Director of Human Resources. So she's been there for 8 years. She earned her master's in HR development from Towson University and has a degree in economics from James Madison. Mega Patel is the HR specialist with Harkins. She joined coming up on your 3-year anniversary already, Mega, if you can imagine that. Prior to that, she was 6 years as an HR manager at Wenner Bread Products. She's a graduate of the New York Institute of Technology and earned her master's in HR management from the University of Maryland. And last but certainly not least, we have Keith Apton, the Managing Director, Wealth Management of the Capital ESOP Group of UBS in Washington, D.C. Keith is the founding partner of the Capital ESOP Group, and he heads up their private wealth practice where he determines clients' needs and matches them with the proper resources. And Keith has a degree in finance from the Virginia Tech University. With that, Keith, I am going to shut my microphone off and turn it over to you.
Great, thanks, Steve. And I'm going to quickly get out of the way here and smile when I say this. I've been in the ESOP community for going on 21 years now, 22 years. And very few companies have the success that Harkins Builders does. They've done everything right, from the ESOP formation to the client communication and the growth of the business. So with that, Kathy, let me kick it over to you and welcome and thank you for joining us. Give us a little insight as to who is Harkins and what is your experience with the ESOP within the employees, the culture, and the business itself.
Thank you, Keith. Meg and I are really happy to be with you. And yes, we do have a very successful ESOP. Harkins started back in 1965. Thomas Harkins opened the doors and very successful. And within the first 35 years, we had one other sole owner, Blaze Cook, who started as a laborer with Harkins and worked his way through to the executive team and then bought the company from Thomas Harkins. In 2001, prior to 2001, Blaze Cook wanted to make sure that each employee at Harkins, from labor on up to executive, had a retirement plan and a retirement account. So that's when they that's when we transitioned to an ESOP in 2001. He wanted to make sure that everyone in the organization had an opportunity for secure retirement. We are a mid-sized general contractor serving the Mid-Atlantic region, the Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Jersey region, as well as the Carolinas. So essentially, we're working towards the East Coast, serving the entire East Coast. 80% of our clients are repeat business and repeat clients and developers, and we build multifamily, government, and commercial markets. When Blaze Cook was considering the ESOP, there was really no clear successor. There was no family member or hierarchy to take over the organization. Thomas Harkins and Blaze Cook created a family culture within the Harkins family, and they wanted to keep that going. As I mentioned, Blaze Cook wanted everyone to have a retirement account, particularly those that were the hourly workers that worked for us, the laborers and the punch-out carpenters. So in 2001, we created 61% of our organization as an ESOP. We took out what Steve said, a partial sale, and we had two loans. One was with a local bank, and the other was a note payable to Blaze Cook. Our initial ESOP contribution was $2.5 million, and we allocated $353,000 of the 1 million outstanding ESOP shares on December 31st, 2022. So that was an exciting time for us. In 2003, we paid off our local bank, and in 2005, we paid off Blaze Cook, which was much earlier than we anticipated. All shares were fully allocated in December of 2005, and the first ESOP retirement benefit was paid out December of 2006. So kind of fast forward, in 2009, we became 100% fully 100% ESOP with bringing our original shareholder to zero ownership. That was October of 2009. And the ESOP bought the remaining shares owned by the individuals. 100% of the employee owned December 31st, 2013. So as of 2013, and I guess I should back up a little bit. There were some executive shares between 2009 and 2013 that we bought, and then we became 100% ESOP December of 2013. Mega, why don't you share about the ESOP team structure when we developed the ESOP at Harkins?
Sure. The ESOP team structure has obviously changed through the years. But currently we have an inside and outside team. The outside team members would consist of our valuation company, as well as our auditors. And then our in-house ESOP committee would consist of trustees, a board member, ESOP administrator, as well as two other Harkins employees. We have an investment advisor and legal counsel. So the committee meets once a quarter to discuss in detail as far as our investments within the plan and any other legal updates.
Great. Well, I appreciate the background, guys. Let me ask a question as it pertains to the impact at the organizational level all the way down to the employees. How has the conversion, Kathy, in particular, to a 100% employee-owned business changed the model in which the way you do business?
So the most important thing out of an ESOP is that we're all individual owners within the organization, and just having that vested interest in the company has been so critical to our success. The employees have opportunities, I would suspect, at our organization that they wouldn't have at other places. They're involved in various committees and at various levels. There's an open door policy. So there's tremendous buy-in and support at all levels for employee owners.
In a two-pronged question here, if you can walk us through, one, how was the rollout of the ESOP communicated to the employees? So there's a stock sale to the ESOP. I'll focus on the second stage, which is more recent. And all of a sudden, there's going to be more shares to be released to these employees. How was it communicated? Who did it? Was it internal, or did you have somebody external to the company come make the announcement and explain what it means to the employees? And the second part of that question is, what was the mantra of the employees after the announcement, call it for the 30 days that followed that?
So I wasn't here when the ESOP started back in 2001, 2002, but I can tell you that the communication was very involved. It's a confusing process. It's a confusing concept for people to wrap their head around. I know Blaze Cook did have multiple conversations with the employees, and he said that I guarantee you there will be some millionaires in this room from the ESOP. And there was some skepticism, some doubt as to how is he really going to do this. But we currently have multiple millionaires at Harkins in the tenure of when we started in 2001 to present, and they are not all executives. So initially the buy-in was a little bit of skepticism, but as we over communicated how the process works and how it's split between stock and the cash component and where you earn your dividends and those kinds of things, that we gained more momentum over the years, and we're reaping the benefits today.
And Megha, maybe this is a good question for you, being that you came over there 3 years ago. As somebody that was looking for a career change or looking for a new company, how was the ESOP communicated to you as a new employee as a recruiting tool to ultimately have a place to build a career?
That's a great question, because when Kathy just had first met me in my interview, ESOP is a completely new concept to me. So she had done a great job explaining as far as what the benefits are. You know, one of the biggest things is, as an employee owner, you take, you know, some ownership of, I need to bring a certain skill set to, you know, build with this company. So I think that's one of the biggest things, that we have a voice. And, you know, there's also a certain level of comfort knowing that if I stay with this company for many years, I mean, again, you know, that's why we have so many employees that have great longevity, that, you know, I'm set for retirement. So I think that's one of the main reasons it's utilized as part of recruiting new employees, that, you know, we get to be part of something big.
Keith, we also created, our accounting controller and assistant controller created a spreadsheet, which is a very conservative estimate of the ESOP, the stock and cash components that go into the ESOP. And essentially, for our recruiting tool, we plug in your salary in the upper left corner, and this goes over a 40-year period. And I know that seems like a long period of time, but we just had an employee retire after 55 years. So our tenure is over 10 years right now, and our retention is 96%. So we take this tool and it's very, very conservative, and we show people over time, if you got a 3% increase in your salary and, you know, conservative estimates of dividend shares and those kinds of things, it shows what you will earn in your ESOP at year 10, 20, 30, 40. It's quite remarkable.
Very cool. Very cool and impactful for people to be able to see what it means for them for longevity and staying with the business. Not every business does that. And I want to compliment you again, telling you, as I said in the introduction, I've been in this industry for 21 years. The best ESOPs are the ESOPs or the companies, the boards that actually embrace the culture and they have the proper metrics in place for the employee communication. And what you guys are doing is not the norm. So very cool that you're doing that. Let me ask about the client communication to your customers. If we were to talk to the management team of Harkins, what would they say is the reception? Are you guys out there sharing the ESOP story and what it means as you're bidding for work? And what has been the reaction been from clients to know that they're working with an ESOP?
It's been an overwhelmingly positive reaction over the 55 years that we've been in business. We have conservatively 80% repeat business. And one of the things that keeps echoing when we continue working with our partners, our clients, is that we have a very high team spirit about us. And there's a lot of collaboration. Matter of fact, we moved to our Columbia office to have some more open collaboration space. And, it's about the client, it's about the success of the project, and it's a team effort, and we're all in it together. So I strongly feel that being an ESOP and an employee owner, you feel like you have a seat at the table in that design team or on that project team or in the HR department that's supporting those that are on the front lines in the field. So I think it's been a very positive experience for us.
Okay. Mecca, I'll go back to you and ask this question. Walk the audience through the biggest difference, and I'll say just pick one or two, between working at a non-employee-owned company versus working at an employee-owned company. And I wouldn't say just focus on the fact that you have a retirement benefit that's meaningful for you financially. Kind of give us a feel for Monday through Friday going to work. What is the big difference or differences between working at an ESOP versus not working at an ESOP as an employee?
So speaking from personal experience, I've worked with a company that was not an ESOP for 6 years and now working at Harkins, which has been a completely different experience. Working at a non-ESOP company, it's very business oriented. It's all about profit, not so much about working together, finding common goals, and the team camaraderie. So it's where Harkins is just that. We're family oriented. We have the family culture. It's all about building teams, relationships, and again, working towards a goal together. Growing Harkins into something bigger.
Steve, let me kick it over to you just for a moment. I'm going to come back and I'll kind of ask a couple more questions, but anything that comes to mind that you would want to take the time to ask Kathy or Mecca?
Thanks, Keith. I'd love to ask Kathy. I know Kathy wasn't there when the sale happened, but I think you've been around long enough to know the history. But I think there's business owners on the call that will see this call that are sitting at a moment that when your ESOP was created, they're sitting at the same moment that your founder was. And I'm just wondering if you have any history of what could have happened rather than an ESOP. I know you talked about them wanting to create a meaningful retirement benefit. So maybe it's a little bit different, but when businesses of that size start to get successful, I can imagine that other firms like yours are calling to say, we should merge, we would like to buy you. I'm just curious if you've heard of any thoughts of what else could have happened with the company rather than the way that it went.
Well, I'm sure back when Blaze Cook was contemplating an ESOP, he was also thinking about another sole ownership and having somebody buy the business. but we were very strong through the years. We've grown from, in my tenure, we've grown from 160 employees in 8 years to 250, and we've grown from 250 million on up to 450, and our goal is 625 in 2025. So we've really grown through the years. We're profitable. We have strong bonding capacity in the construction industry. So as a business owner, I think about if you have a very sound business, an ESOP should be one of your considerations. Like I had mentioned before, Blaze started as a laborer, and he put his blood, sweat, and tears into this organization, and he believed in every employee. I mean, he treated it as if everyone was an employee owner, even when we weren't an ESOP. So he believed in everyone, and the ESOP made sense for his mission about leaving, what he always said, leaving it better than what it was. So, I think if you're in a good financial position, it's certainly, important for you to talk to somebody like Keith or a financial advisor about an ESOP, and if it makes sense for you. It did for us. We've been told by our advisors that our ESOP is probably within the top 5% in the nation, running extremely well.
Great. And I will just add that, employee ownership across the board, ESOP is the most common form of employee ownership. But I think one of the great parts about the Greater Washington Center for Employee Ownership is they have a long history in the worker cooperative space too, which is a little bit different of a type of employee ownership. But both of those types of employee ownership, whether it be a worker cooperative or an ESOP, they both do exactly what both of you have talked about, which is empower the employees, create a team, create a family of owners where you're not just going to work. Like you said, Meg, I think you put it really, brilliantly. You go to make a profit, you're not going to punch a clock. Sometimes it's more than that, but it's just this different feel, and both worker cooperatives and ESOPs do that. And then I'll just want to add one other thing that I think is important to talk about that I saw when I was researching your story, and I'll just share a real quick screen here, is what the ESOP or what your company culture has done for your level of community service. What I've seen from the inside looking out is just tremendous community service and the giving back to the community. Can you talk a little bit about how employee ownership, creates that or expands on it?
Well, this is going back to Thomas Harkins when he started the company, and then Blaze Cook taking it over. Community service and giving back to the communities in which we live, work, and play were very important to them. So when Blaze transitioned the company to an ESOP, that gives us more ownership to continue the legacy of Thomas Harkins and Blaze Cook. We're probably giving $500,000 a year to community service, nonprofits. We're involved, as you can see on the screen, in all sorts of events, from rebuilding together to helping our community colleges to light the night. I think our goal was $50,000 this year for leukemia and lymphoma. That just continues, and it's just grown, particularly as employee owners see that they can invest themselves in the community even further.
Great.
I'd just like to add, Kathy, that 3 years into Harkins, and someone who's also really passionate about community service, to be able to do it through your employer is, just a wonderful way to do something with the community and with the Harkins team. So I think it was a complete change for me.
Keith, I have a question for you, actually. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Capital ESOP Group? At which point do you enter the process, and how do you help business owners who are interested in exploring an employee ownership conversion?
That was an impromptu question. I hope I have an answer. That's an accurate answer. We are specialists in understanding all that goes into ESOPs, to include aligning clients with the right professionals in the respective lanes. Our approach is a little bit different, Jennifer, which I think is very well received in the community. While we understand everything about ESOPs, our clients are business owners, typically entrepreneurs that have companies between 10 million in revenue to 300 million in revenue in size. And what we do is we start with educating them about what an ESOP is. Because what we have found is a lot of CPAs, lawyers, business owners never really look at the ESOP as an option, simply because, like anybody, we're never going to do something we don't understand. And an ESOP's a niche. So our practice is typically one in which we get involved early. We're focusing on business owners that are anywhere from 6 months to 2 years prior to selling their companies. And we do a lot of analytical modeling to help them understand what does an ESOP mean to them financially with the waterfall on an after-tax basis. What does it mean to the company? What does it mean to the employees? And Jennifer, that's the baseline. So now we've actually gone through establishing, without doing an ESOP, we've established for a business owner, here's what an ESOP looks like. We've demystified what somebody doesn't understand. They know the acronym, but they don't understand how it actually works. And then we pivot. And rather than suggesting that that ESOP is the right fit, we then compare and contrast what an ESOP would mean to the company and to the seller or the business owner to selling outright to a third party, whether that's private equity or selling to a strategic buyer. If the company's large enough, they can clearly go public. And so if we stop there, what we've really done is help the client through education fully understand all their options. And what I like about that is we now know when people are doing ESOPs, they're doing ESOPs from a place of education because they know it's the right fit versus their other options. Conversely, we help people, Jennifer, with outright sales to third party. And ultimately, we feel very comfortable that that's the right fit because they didn't just rush to that, which is the easiest way to do it, because their investment bankers or their lawyers or the CPA said it's the right fit. They're doing that because we've identified why an ESOP was not the right fit for them. So that is our process and how we work with business owners.
Thank you for sharing that.
Well, Steve, I don't have any further questions. I thought that Kathy and Mega did a phenomenal job of explaining their story, what makes Harkins different. I hope that everybody by now understands it is a meaningful difference for the culture of the company. Kathy talked about the projections. It is a meaningful difference for what it means to the financial well-being of these plan participants. One thing that was not said that I think is important to share, so that ESOPs are not misstated or oversold for this wonderful benefit for the employees. The reality is everything that Kathy took the time to explain is real. That is as intended how it works for the employees. But it doesn't happen overnight. The employees, to get this meaningful retirement benefit, there is a vesting schedule, which is not a good thing or a bad thing. It's just very real. It's a retirement plan. So as employees join these companies or they're currently there, there's a meaningful contribution that goes into their retirement accounts, but there is a vesting of that stock. So that does not incentivize somebody to come join a company, get shares, and then walk away. That stock would not be vested. So I guess if there's one more question, Steve, and we can wrap up with this, unless you have anything else you want to share at the end, is, Kathy, why don't you walk everybody through in the audience how the vesting works for an employee and how you guys communicate that to them?
Actually, I'll kick it over to Mega and then I'll wrap the question up.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Sure. So the vesting schedule, an employee is fully vested when they're 6 years with Harkins. It starts when they're eligible, after they meet the eligibility requirements, meaning they would have to be with the company 1 year, be employed 12/31 of the plan year, and meet 1,000 hours to be eligible. And then the vesting begins at 20% when they enroll. And then at 6 years, they're fully vested in the plan, which is 100%.
And it's interesting, when I started 8 years ago, the management team, upper management team would always say to the HR staff, when you're hiring people, you got to sell the ESOP, you got to sell the ESOP. And I 100% agree, but it's really hard to sell an ESOP to a 21-year-old student coming out of college. So that's why we created the spreadsheet that shows you a conservative estimate over time of what this might look like. But over communicating that, you know, in 3 to 4 years, you'll have those statements, and then it starts to grow exponentially over time. But it's been a fun process, and it's always fun to explain the ESOP to anyone that joins our team.
And Keith, I think the other thing we should do is just if anybody has questions, they certainly can put them in the chat if there's specific questions about the ESOP or about the Harkins ESOP story. We can certainly take questions there as well. Is there anything, Kathy, that you wanted to add that we missed touching on that you know, we can talk all day about the wonderful virtues of an ESOP, but is there anything that you wanted to add as well, or Mega?
We touched on most everything. We're just really pleased to see how far we've come with the ESOP, and it does take blood, sweat, and tears to get here. And you have to have a structure, and you have to have your outside counsel in place, and different components to it. But we're in a really good place, and I believe I had mentioned that we have several people in our organization that are millionaires plus, and it's not just our executive team since 2001.
And that's a shift right now. I'm guessing that your ESOP is kind of going through this shift of people like Mega coming into the company and receiving new shares, which we won't get into detail, but she's receiving her shares from the people who are leaving. You know, she's buying her shares as she comes in. And so I'm guessing you're probably in that you're not a completely mature ESOP, but I'm guessing there's some turnover now where people are starting to retire, they're starting to pay those out, and then new people are coming out, which is a great feature of an ESOP. Is it's just everlasting, where Mega can come in, start to get shares because someone else is leaving. So I'm guessing you're in that mode right now.
Correct. Yes. Recycling and purchasing shares from those that have left the organization. People who are retiring are you know, diversifying, and so it's exciting. And our goal is for the younger people to get, you know, we're trying to buy back as many shares as we can from those that are not employees with Harkins, so that we can give the younger, newer employees more shares, as opposed to more cash in their portfolio, so that they can earn those dividends and increase their ESOP more substantially over time.
Right. Well, Jennifer, I didn't see any questions come in. So I think with that, I would just like to personally take the chance to thank all three of you, Keith and Mega and Kathy, for sharing your story. Jennifer, I know you put something in the chat, but you're going to, will you send out the slides and a link to the video when you're done?
Yes, so we're going to send out the slide deck and a link to the video this week. Thank you all for attending. I encourage you to complete the intake form on the GWCEO website if you'd like to schedule a free employee ownership consultation call with an expert advisor. I want to thank Steve and the Employee Ownership Expansion Network for partnering with us on this event. I want to thank Keith, Kathy, and Mega for sharing your wonderful wealth of knowledge and experience with us all. And thank you all for attending today's webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.